All right, regular session will now come to order. We are going to begin with the approval of the commission meeting minutes from November. Commissioners, do you have any corrections or additions to the minutes of the November meeting?
I'll move that we approve them from November.
So, Sherry, that was moved by Commissioner Clouda and seconded by Commissioner Price to accept the minutes as presented. Although any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. Oh my gosh. I'll tell you what, somebody's going to have to keep me going today.
I'm trying.
Thank God. Between you and Commissioner Price, I think this is my last full meeting, and I'm just already hit the relaxation zone or something. So, I've already missed, first of all, that I implemented this year saying the Pledge of Allegiance when we started, and I forgot all about that. So, we're still going to do that. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Also, if anybody could make sure that their cell phones are silenced and any disruptions in that way, we'd appreciate it because we do appreciate all of you coming. In addition to that, should you like to speak today on a specific topic, there are these blue slips out by the front door that you can fill out, and that way, as we're discussing that topic, we would make sure that you get that opportunity. There will be calls to the public before we break for lunch and at the end of the day as well for something else, but we want to appreciate your time in coming, and we want to give you that opportunity. And in addition to that, Deputy Director Kennedy has reminded me that we should do some introductions.
You want to start with commissioners or staff?
We can start with the commissioners. Commissioner Anselmi, would you mind starting?
Mark Anselmi represents Sweetwater, Carbon, and Albany counties.
Commissioner Charles Price, representing Teton, Sublette, Lincoln, and Uintah counties.
Commissioner Carrie Little, and I represent Campbell, Johnson, and Sheridan counties.
Commissioner Keith Culver, I am from the northeast corner. I represent Crook, Weston, and Niobrara counties.
Richard Clouda from Lander, and I represent Converse, Natrona, and Fremont County.
And Commissioner Rael is here today and had to just step out for a few minutes, and he will be back. So,
What about the other good Democrat? What about him?
oh, and Commissioner Crank, as most of you or all of you know, was recently in a significant car accident and will not be able to join us here today, but we look forward to his speedy recovery and his return to the commission. So,
And Madam President, members of the Commission, good morning. I'm John Kennedy. Director Talbot is at a meeting today with the governor. Be back tonight, so I'll be sitting in here for you today. In terms of staff, we can just go around and introduce staff and employees that are here. I do want to recognize our newest employee in the director's office, Jessica Brown. I think all the commissioners have met Jessica. She's new. She's going to be here hanging out with us the next couple of days, learning about department issues. We were able to steal Jessica from the Board of Equalization, and we're really, really happy to have her in the director's office. So she will be teaming up with Sheridan, and you'll be hearing and working a lot with Jessica. So with that, if we would like to just go around starting with Sheridan and introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Kirk Miller, Deputy Chief of Fish Division.
Doug Fremeyer, Deputy Wildlife Division. Kevin Berg, Deputy Chief Wildlife Division, and Deputy, or Chief Designate can step out and finish up with the taxes.
Lauren Wooden, Chief Engineer. Ray Brady Hoff, Habitat and Access Branch Chief.
Brian Rognan, Land Administration.
Harvey Shaw, Land Surveyor.
Rick King, Letterby Wildlife Supervisor.
Scott Cochran, Services Division Chief.
Rebecca Fitzgerald, Communications, Outreach Supervisor.
I'm Dave Swan. I work for Enterprise Technology Services and I support
Dan Coleman, EPS, supporting IT.
All right. Thank you all, and thank you for the members of the public who are here today as well.
Updates, if you could.
Yes.
Madam President, members of the commission, just a couple of quick updates, and we'll move into Division Chief Cochran and his lands agenda items here in just a second. First, 11:30 today, lunch. We will have lunch provided for the commissioners and for department employees. It'll be up in the Bighorn Room, and we will have some special issues we're going to talk about very informally at lunch, just as we're eating lunch. We're going to look at some more maps and photos of the Laramie Game and Fish Lab Regional Office project, which we'll discuss not only in open session, but we'll have an opportunity to just have some informal dialogue during lunch in that regard. Also, I think Director Talbot forwarded an email to the commissioners that he received from Jim Magagna. Tonight is the stock growers legislative reception at 6 o'clock. Obviously not anything to do with the commission meeting, but Jim Magagna did want to reach out and let you know you are invited to attend that legislative session. Tomorrow morning, as a reminder, we need to be at Little America for breakfast by 7:15 at the latest. We need to have breakfast and be able to get back here for the commission meeting that starts at 9 o'clock. So we kind of need to keep moving on that in the morning. Finally, Madam President, members of the commission, I believe Sheridan spoke with you already. There's a difference in the order of the notebooks versus your agenda item, your agenda. So the agenda is accurate. You may need to look a little bit different order on your notebooks electronically to find the agenda item, but it should be pretty easy to do. With that, Madam President, members of the commission, we are ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Cochran.
Madam President, Commissioners, Deputy Director Kennedy, good morning. Starting with our authorization to proceed with negotiations for acquiring or disposing of fee title and our less than fee title property rights. With that, we'll start with our first, which consists of easements at the South Park Wildlife Habitat Management Area for WYDOT's highway widening project. WYDOT will be widening the highway south of Jackson, Highway 191, 8926. As part of that project, they'll be replacing several bridge structures south of Jackson to increase public safety and to allow safer passage for wildlife. This project will run along, as you can see on the map here, the eastern edge of our South Park Wildlife Habitat Management Area, which is delineated by the red line. And what WYDOT would like to see happen is they're requesting 8 temporary easements and 1 permanent easement as part of the construction process. All these delineated in purple, and this little tiny spot right here is the permanent easement. As part of this project, the right-of-way will be fenced with a wildlife barrier fence and, as I mentioned, bridges to allow safe wildlife passage. We believe this project will not impact our wildlife habitat management area, and this property was acquired with federal aid from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and will be in compliance with that as the project moves forward. So the department recommends to the commission to authorize the department to proceed with negotiations with the Wyoming Department of Transportation for the 8 temporary easements and 1 permanent easement at the South Park Wildlife Habitat Management Area.
Mr. Coffin, remind me, what is the permanent easement for? What is their need?
Madam President, I believe the permanent easements for a drainage structure in the right-of-way for water. Construction of that.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I guess I'm pretty clear, this is just a construction easement for construction, basically. And then when the fences go back up, why it'll be pretty much the same as it was
Except for the 1 permit,
for the widening permit.
for the permanent.
Madam President, Commissioner Price, that's correct. The only thing that will change was this small piece here. Would be an easement for YDOT. The rest of it will be, once construction's complete and revegetated, go back to normal.
Other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Anselmi.
Is it for 1 season, or how long is the easement for?
Madam President, Commissioner Anselmi, yes, 1 season.
This year?
All right, commissioners, if there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we accept this as presented on item A.
Second.
So the motion was made by Commissioner Price and seconded by Commissioner Anselmi to accept the department's recommendation to allow permits to YDOT on the Hoback Junction easement and construction permits. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So line item B is in conjunction with the one we just discussed. This is for, again, South Park Wildlife Habitat Management Area, Teton County Fence Maintenance Memorandum of Agreement. Teton County is working cooperatively with YDOT and the Melody Ranch to construct a wildlife drift fence that will help direct wildlife to our South Park Wildlife Habitat Management Area and away from the private land, which is the Melody Ranch. This proposed drift fence is in part due to the widening project, which includes those previously discussed wildlife underpasses and wildlife fences. So as part of this project, Teton County is proposing to pay for construction of the 1,700 feet of wildlife drift fence, which will be built on the Melody Ranch property. And Teton County is requesting to the department to enter in a memorandum of agreement that we would maintain the fence after it's constructed. So the department believes the drift fence will have positive impacts for wildlife migrating to and from South Park Wildlife Habitat Management Area. So this, of course, is the highway here, underpass for the wildlife to get underneath. This would be the proposed new fence. And commissioners, as far as maintenance responsibilities, our folks on the ground there already take care of the elk fence, and this would probably add a couple hours to their annual maintenance of the existing fence with the new responsibilities. So the department recommends to the commission to vote to authorize the department to proceed with negotiations with Teton County for the maintenance of the proposed wildlife drift fence on Melody Ranch land.
Commissioners, questions?
I would move.
Move.
Authorize the maintenance of the fence.
I'll second.
Okay, so the motion was made by Commissioner Clauda and seconded by Commissioner Culver to accept the department's recommendation to allow the new drift fence on Melody Ranch wildlife in the migration corridor. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Final item on authorization to proceed is a project you heard about in Sheridan at our last commission meeting when Ducks Unlimited gave their informational presentation to you. They had mentioned they were under contract with Mr. Shamel on acquiring water rights on his property, which was contingent on our state engineer's office board of control approval, and that approval was denied. So that eliminated the contract for that piece of property. Now Ducks Unlimited is asking for our assistance on moving forward with this project. Just a kind of refresher, the properties north of our Springer Wildlife Habitat Management Area. It's directly south. This is the town of Yoder. This is Springer, WHMA, and this is Bump Sullivan. The proposed property is delineated in yellow. It has water rights associated with it out of Bump Sullivan. So the DU is trying to acquire the property without the associated headquarters and associated improvements. And if this project comes to fruition, Ducks Unlimited acquires it, they would eventually like to transfer ownership to the department, or to the commission, excuse me. So the property consists of 342 acres, and it would be managed as part of the Springer Bump Sullivan Wildlife Habitat Management Area. In conjunction with the fee title project, it also butts up against 160 acres of state land, which would provide additional access for sportsmen. This project's estimated to be valued at $560,000 based on recent appraisals. The commission previously approved $200,000 out of our Habitat Trust Fund as a match for a NACA grant that DU recently acquired. So we already have some money into the project. And we would seek, we would work cooperatively with Ducks Unlimited to seek additional funding to complete the purchase. So we are asking the commission to vote to authorize the department to proceed with assisting Ducks Unlimited in negotiations for the acquisition of the Shamel property.
Mr. Coffrin, I have a question on that. So what actually is the expectation of Ducks Unlimited in terms of the participation by the commission? Is it just taking management over, and if they can reach some ownership of this property, or is they're looking for some monetary assistance, or and what management costs might be something we might be looking at in the future?
So, Madam President, the expectation from Ducks Unlimited, I think they would just like some assistance in trying to raise the remaining funding. There's no ask of the commission for the remaining amount. As I mentioned, we have a considerable amount of money already in the project as match for the NACA grant. But they would like to transfer ownership to the commission if this project comes to fruition. They raise the money, acquire it. Part of the reason the Board of Control turned down their contract was the water wasn't totally proved up on the property. There's 233 acres, and there was roughly 150 of it that has been historically used. Ducks Unlimited would like to prove up on that water to get it all adjudicated and transfer the full amount with the property to the commission.
Would there be with the present, those water rights, their present usage, filed usage, would that remain? That we wouldn't be asking for any change of water right usage designation or anything?
Madam President, we may change the use of the water, but not the total water right now.
Commissioner Price.
Okay. President Little and Scott. This 560 evaluation, was that based on with or without water rights on that property? Because that seemed to be the key part of.
Madam President, Commissioner Price, that's included in, the water is included in that price.
It was included, it is included in it. So they have to get the property, prove up on the water, and then the transfer would take place. And I guess besides that, they've got to raise up the other $360,000 also.
Madam President, Commissioner Price, that's
How
correct.
close are they to doing that?
Madam President, Commissioner Price, we're trying to get under contract with Mr. Shamel this week, so I don't think they've started their fundraising efforts, to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Cochran, at this present time, not really sure what the expectation of the commission, what is being asked. I have to be honest, I'm not really clear on that. They just want us, you're asking us to just say, we're willing to move forward, we're willing to take over management should the purchase actually come through? Is that what we're being at? Because if we've, we're not being asked for money, I mean, I guess that's what I'm concerned about is, are we being asked, are we making a commitment to an unknown, an unspecified amount? I'm concerned about that.
Madam President, your first statement was accurate. We would just like authorization from you to proceed with DU to try to raise the money. There's no financial obligation on part of the commission, and they would just like to know if we'd be willing to take ownership on behalf of the commission if this project comes to fruition.
President.
Commissioner Price.
You said there's no financial, but you say it means in addition to what we've already committed.
Right. Commissioner Culver.
President Little, I would like to speak in support of this project. The proximity of this acreage to our Springer and Bump Sullivan units, I think makes it valuable for both habitat and hunting potential for upland game birds and waterfowl in the future. So we've got 150 some acres that is irrigated currently that we would be able to irrigate for habitat, or if it given a drought year, that water could be diverted to Bump Sullivan to maintain water levels there. The proximity to our Yoder bird farm, I would imagine that in the future we would do releases there, am I correct? And expand our bird hunting opportunities?
Madam President, Commissioner Culver, you're correct. We have a lot of flexibility in our management if this property comes under commission ownership. I think there's an opportunity there for releasing birds, for duck and goose hunting.
And if I may, most of the other properties down there, the farm properties, we work with some of the local farmers to farm that on shares for us, correctly?
Madam President, Commissioner Culver, that's correct, and that's speaking to Madam President's question on management. And if this property comes under commission ownership, it would be managed similar to how Springer Wildlife Habitat Management Area is managed. We just don't have the capabilities to farm, and it's more cost efficient to have a local farmer do that for us, and it alleviates a lot of the financial burden on the property, irrigation costs, etc.
Well,
by doing that.
Madam President, if I can continue.
You may.
So we have already committed $200,000 to this project. I would like to publicly thank our partners with Ducks Unlimited for their involvement so far and wish them luck in continuing to raise funds. But if you are ready for a motion, I would move that the commission authorize the department to proceed with assisting Ducks Unlimited in negotiations for acquisition of this property.
Jerry, did you get that? That was Commissioner Culver's motion just to proceed with acquisition, and a second by Commissioner Anselmi. Now I would just for purposes of brief further discussion, I would just caution that what my concern was, is that, I mean, Commissioner Culver's right, there's already a certain amount of money already involved in this, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't proceeding and making a motion that was going to tie future commissions to an unknown amount out there that they, you know, that they wouldn't be able to. I mean, hopefully it'll just go through as desired by all the parties involved, Ducks Unlimited and the department, but that was my point, is that I just didn't want us committing to something that was unknown at this point. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion or a vote on the motion. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Madam President, Commissioners, Deputy Director Kennedy, moving on to the approval to acquire or dispose of fee title and/or less than fee title property rights. Starting with the renewal of the Snake River Von Gontard Public Access Area lease. Many of you probably remember this coming up on an annual basis due to the landowner only willing to do it on a yearly basis. Von Gontard is located just south of our South Park Bridge, south of Jackson, excuse me. It's an important access area, and we have counts exceeding over 25,000 vehicles per season. There's been a new park opened here by the county on BLM land, which may eventually replace the need for this access area, but at the current time they're limiting the numbers that can use that new property, which necessitates, in the Jackson region's eyes, to keep this open for safety and to allow fishermen and boaters access to the river.
Commissioner Price.
Breaking in, you showed up on the left side or there of the road, that little piece that is where the new parking lot's on the right side. Oh, no, it's on that side, yes. And it's in and completed. Because it's over there toward the river, and there's river access on that too.
Madam President, Commissioner Price, that's correct. They're just limiting the amount of people that can use
You can have.
this. So it's not unlimited, and obviously what they're providing isn't meeting the need of the sportsman. So the department would recommend to the commission to vote to approve the renewal of the Snake River Von Gontard Public Access Area lease, which includes existing funding of $2,500 from our FY17 property rights budget.
You still have the floor, Commissioner Price.
President Little and Mr. Coffin, is this further down than the highway improvement is down there? I've not been able to connect up because the one where we did the highway work up in the HMA, that red line is just above that. So that entrance, is that just above the red line there in that?
Madam President, Commissioner Price, the red line here is the South Park WHMA boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Boundary actually goes like this.
Okay.
So what's right up against it?
Yeah, that I can see. What I'm questioning is, see, the highway's doing their work down through that area too. And is the highway work above this area?
It's going through this. Yeah. Madam President, Commissioner Price, I guess the highway project will be going through this project as well.
Okay, so it is included down this area where we are Von Gontard's providing the access.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess he's been appraised of that, I would expect. Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Coffin? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I make the motion that we accept the item as proposed by Mr. Cothran.
So the motion has been made by Commissioner Price to accept the recommendation of the department on the Von Gontard, continuing that,
2,500.
easement of the public access.
I second that motion.
And a second by Commissioner Rael. Thank you. Any other discussion?
Just to note that a few years ago, Mr. Gondotard, he got the landowner of that district, what do you call it, landowner of the year. He's done this lease for many years, and it's really good for public access. I mean, like a lot of these guys, he really doesn't have to do it, but I think it's commendable that he does let the public go in there on that, because that's if you've been up there in the summer, man, that's
Easy
pretty
access.
busy.
Yeah.
Easy access.
It is, and Commissioner Anselmi, that was really a commendable thing to say too, because he is right. This is really something by a landowner, and it's good to recognize those that are, that do go above and beyond. Because this is not that much money for that, what he offers. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. There's no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So line item B is the Dawson Kiefer Conservation Easement. You remember at the September 2016 meeting, you authorized the department to proceed with the acquisition, or proceed with negotiations. This would be a donated conservation easement near the Alcova Reservoir. Landowners have agreed to limit new developments on the property, allow limited public access for archery hunting, and to donate money into our Habitat Trust Fund for conservation work. This project consists of 480 acres of private lands adjacent to thousands of acres of public lands administered by the BLM and Bureau of Reclamation. There has been existing development, you can see on the map. Right here, this is the highway. And these lands considered for this easement support high wildlife values. As I mentioned, public access to the property will be allowed during big game archery seasons. There'll be some minor costs for public access signs and enforcement. The department recommends to the commission to vote to approve the acquisition through donation of the Dawson Kiefer Conservation Easement.
Commissioner Price, do you have a question?
I'm ready to make a motion that we proceed with Scott's recommendation.
Second.
So a motion to accept the department's recommendation on moving forward on the Dawson Kiefer Conservation Easement was made by Commissioner Price and seconded by Commissioner Clouda. Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Lastly, line item C is for the renewal of the Sinks Canyon Public Access Area Cooperative Agreement. We acquired this property originally from mule deer, elk, and bighorn sheep winter range, and the canyon's home to a diversity of habitats. It's along the middle fork of the Paposia River, just outside of Lander. In 1971, the commission entered into a cooperative agreement with the then Wyoming Recreation Commission, which is now the Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources. That agreement was renewed in 2002, and now that agreement is up again for renewal. The department recommends to the commission to vote to approve the renewal of the Sinks Canyon Public Access Area Cooperative Agreement with Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources for a 15-year term.
Questions?
Madam President, that's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Commissioner Price.
I make the motion we accept the department's recommendation to
I
move
second
ahead
that
with the
motion.
Sinks Park, or recreation thing with the Sinks Park.
Okay. So Sherry, we have a motion made by Commissioner Price to approve the department's recommendation on the Sinks Park Public Access Area, and we have a second by Commissioner Rael. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. Sinks Canyon, did I say Parks?
It is part of the park, you know, they make it, it's Wyoming State Park.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coffin, appreciate your presentation. Mr. Smith. Deputy Director Smith.
Madam President, Commissioners, Deputy Director Kennedy, this morning it's my pleasure to introduce to you someone that's spoken before to the Commission, Samantha Dwinell. She's a graduate student under Dr. Kevin Monteith. They both came over this morning. At our request, we wanted to provide you another update on the Wyoming Range Mule Deer project, which you have been actively helping fund. And Commissioner Price's last meeting, we'd like to have a final request to have Samantha present this morning. So as we get this queued up, we'll have Sam come up and talk to you about her findings to date.
Were you interested in the mule deer, Commissioner Price, or you just wanted to hear Samantha talk?
I just want to see Samantha. No, I am very interested in this and some of the things that she's finding.
Can we turn the lights down a little bit?
Yeah, it is kind of hard to see.
There, and I will say one thing, Samantha is a hard-working individual for this. I mean, she's everywhere. She's got her collars laid out, all the telemetry things, nuts, bolts, wrenches. Welcome, Samantha.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a little embarrassed right now.
I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much for letting me come here and share our research findings with you guys. I think it's great that you guys have showed interest in our research, and especially am really appreciative of the funding that you guys have given to our project for a third year. I think with some of the results I'll show you that we have today, you'll see how important it is to keep this kind of research going within the state, because we're finding out some pretty cool things. So anyways, I'll just dive right into it. So the Wyoming Range mule deer population over the years has exhibited a lot of these trends where you see an increase in the population followed by a decrease. And there's a number of different factors that influence these population trends, ranging from predators, disease, various environmental factors dictated by precipitation. And so our overall research objective here is to determine the relative influence of these factors in regulating population growth for these animals. And so for our research, we're taking an approach using a nutritional ecology framework that allows us to link the individual animal to its landscape. And for Wyoming Range mule deer, it's important for us to do this because they are a migratory herd. And migration is really a perfect example of how closely linked these animals are to their landscape. And what I mean by that is as animals are migrating from their winter ranges to their summer ranges, they're accessing available foraging resources during that time. And as they move across their migration routes onto summer range, it allows them to gain fat. Now this fat gain is really important for when they bring it back to winter range, because it's the currency they use to finance both future reproduction in the following summer, as well as how they finance their own survival on these winter ranges. And another reason why we can use this nutritional ecology framework is because we have the technology now that allows us to do so. So GPS collar technology is quite tremendous right now. We can get really great information from the GPS collars that we put on our deer. Also, the use of ultrasonography to measure changes in fat allows us to understand the relative influence of the different habitats that these animals encounter, the influence of those seasonal ranges on their fat gain and losses. And then that, as I mentioned before, is fat. Those fat reserves are what they use to finance survival and reproduction. And survival and reproduction, as we all know, is really what drives population growth for these animals. So now I'm going to really just dive into some of our, just highlights of some of our preliminary findings. And within, from here on out, I'm going to focus on different findings that we have on the different seasonal ranges. Because each one of these seasonal ranges has different factors that can affect what regulates population growth. So first, I'm going to just highlight some of, again, these are just some of our findings. I've sort of cherry-picked some of the things that we have right now, and so we're working on other things beyond what I'm showing. But anyways, I'll show you some of our findings on migration routes, and really a lot of our work here is focused on linking variability and phenology tracking to mule deer fitness. And so the work that we're doing on migration routes is mostly led by Ellen Aiken. She's a PhD student on it. And she is also using the nutritional ecology framework. So she's using GPS collar data from these deer, identifying their migration routes, as seen here, as well as stopover habitats along those migration routes. And she's characterizing the quality of those migration routes and linking that to fitness of these animals. In addition to that, she's also just looking at how these animals behave in response to their migration routes, like what drives the use of these migration routes. And a cool thing that she's found is that as these deer migrate up an elevational gradient, they're essentially exploiting a gradient in plant greenup as it occurs in the spring. And we all see this as the snow recedes. In the mountains, you see a green wave of nutritious vegetation that follows that. And so basically, what she's seeing is that mule deer are following this wave in greenup so well that they're said to be surfing the green wave. And it's important for these animals to be doing that because if we think of when this occurs, it's right after they're leaving winter range. So they're in the worst nutritional condition that they're potentially going to be in for that year. And they're about to embark on a huge energetic cost because once they arrive to summer range, most of these animals would be giving birth to fawns and trying to rear them throughout the summer. So their ability to surf this green wave in the springtime can be really important in determining their reproductive success in the summer. And so another interesting thing that she's found is that the ability for these animals to surf the green wave varies between wet and dry years. And essentially, let me navigate you guys through this here. So, and actually, I don't know if we check to see if the video works. Yeah, if you put the, might not, yeah, you should be able just to put the cursor, yeah. I guess that's what, it may have been, the video may have been lost in the transfer, I think. It shouldn't be, but there should be a thing when they put the cursor on it. It should prompt them to hit play. Yeah, sorry, you guys gotta go through all the animations again. Well, essentially, as they hopefully get that video playing, what the videos that I'll show you are illustrating is that in this dry year, essentially green up. I think if you, I think it got lost. Yeah. Well, anyways, we'll just move forward without it. Oh, there we go. There. Yeah. So if we look at the dry year here, you can see the dark green represents peak green up, and in the dry year, all of that peak green up is essentially occurring all at once. Where in a wet year, it's a bit more gradual when that peak green up is occurring, and there's more variability in the animal being able to access that green up. So essentially, dry year, They don't have as much access to that green up, so potentially not gaining, regaining those fat reserves that they need for reproduction, versus in a wet year, they have a longer duration where they can reach that green up. So now I'll move on to some of our work on winter ranges, and this work is focused on effects of human disturbance on habitat conditions, behavior, and nutritional condition of mule deer. And the reason why on winter ranges we focus on human disturbance is because, as many of you know, energy development has become a prominent part of the landscape, and much of it occurs on winter ranges for many migratory ungulates, including mule deer. And previous research done by Hall Sawyer and his colleagues on the Pinedale anticline, where there's been pretty rapid development starting in the early 2000s, using GPS collar data, what they noticed was mule deer are essentially avoiding these areas where development is occurring. So on the left, in pre-development, the red represents a high probability of use based on GPS collar data, and the brown represents a low probability of use. You can see before development, their use across that landscape was pretty widespread, but as development moved from the south up through the north, you can see that right next to where that development is occurring, there is a decrease in the probability of use for these deer. And again, this is using GPS collar data. And so this is a pretty interesting finding, but one thing that we don't know from this is, okay, so they may be avoiding these areas, but does that mean that they're then losing out on forage that might potentially be in those spots? Essentially, are they losing out on foraging opportunities? And so we wanted to take the research that Sawyer and his colleagues have done and expand it to the Wyoming range as well. So we conducted this part of our research both on the Pinedale anticline as well as on 2 winter ranges in the Wyoming range, located in the North Wyoming range, winter range located outside of Big Piney and LaBarge area, and the southern winter range near Kemmer and Cokeville and extending down to Evanston. And so again, since we're using a nutritional ecology framework, what we were aiming to do here was link the animal to the landscape. So not only using the GPS collar data and seeing how they respond to energy development, but also going on to the landscape and evaluating first how much available forage there is. So we measured essentially forage abundance and quality throughout all of these winter ranges. And then we also went back and measured how much of that forage was actually used, and that's relative to its proximity to energy development. So we were coupling GPS collar data with what we were able to measure on the ground to really kind of paint a full picture of what's going on. And what we found, and this this aligned with what Hall Sawyer had found, using the GPS collar data, we did find that deer avoided energy development in the same way as seen on the Pinedale anticline. And in addition to that, what we did find was there is forage in those areas that they're essentially missing out on. So there ends up being leftover forage opportunities for these animals that they're just not exploiting because of that avoidance behavior. And another way to think of this is if we bring it back to what's going on the Pinedale anticline, when you look at the direct habitat loss coming from just that development of infrastructure for energy development, we see about a 3% habitat loss, just in direct habitat loss. But then when you apply their avoidance behavior and the forage that ends up being lost because of that avoidance behavior, what we see is actually an indirect habitat loss of 18.5%. So essentially, this avoidance behavior is resulting in a habitat loss that's 6-fold that of direct habitat loss, which I think is pretty interesting stuff. Yeah.
Samantha.
Yeah.
So here's my concern about the data and the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, so I come from an area where, northeast Wyoming, where there's a lot of energy development, not directly where I live, but, near enough.
Yeah.
And I do drive the state a lot, and so I'm over in all the other areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
And while I can easily understand that wildlife would have some propensity to avoid energy areas, especially during the development.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm wondering about when you're collecting your data, those kind of things, because once it's established
Mm-hmm.
and there isn't as much activity in that area.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I drive those areas and there are herds and herds of deer and antelope and whatever wildlife, you know, right out there, you know, next to rigs, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, so what I'm saying is I can understand the data you're presenting during development. But
Mhm.
once it's going, once it's running, and all of that peak activity has not necessarily disappeared, but
Yeah,
decreased.
diminished. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't want us acting like, because it just can't be. I trust my eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and it cannot be that we lose that entirely.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point, because you do, you know, when you're going across these landscapes, like you said, you do see animals near these areas where energy development is occurring. However, I would like to say a couple of things. So when you use the GPS collar data, you're looking at the whole population. And so the difference between that and driving is, when you're driving near these areas, you might see there might be some animals that use it, but they might be more anomalous animals. So like the population itself is actually using areas further away from it, where you've got like a very small subset that may be willing to forego that risk of development and use those areas closer to it. But really on the population level, which is what we're seeing, or which is what we're mostly concerned with, you see at the population level, the majority of those animals are avoiding it. So that's one note I'd like to make. And then the other is that with these results, we purposefully chose those 3 winter ranges because they all range in not only intensity of current activity, but also in age of energy development. So on the Pinedale anticline, that's where there still is a ton of activity there. And so that's why, you know, Hall Sawyer sees that really strong stamp in avoidance. But when we apply our models across all winter ranges, we still see that trend holding. So even in the Calpet country, where the number of the traffic volume is greatly decreased, and the age of that development, those animals have been exposed to it for a long time, we still see this trend of avoidance there at the population level. And then one other thing I would like to note, and this is research that's been done, more research that Hall Sawyer has done. He has actually explicitly looked at habituation patterns on the Pinedale anticline, because this stuff started, you know, 15 plus years ago. And what he's found is essentially there is no habituation that's occurring. And so
I mean, what you're saying is, from my understanding, because I was sitting here thinking of that actual thing. I'm glad you're touching on it, which is, so you're saying that for those animals who might acclimate better to, you know, more disturbance, that isn't genetically carrying through. Is that what you're? Because that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, well, if mom's good with it, I'm good with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and we don't have really the genetic data to be able to say whether it's genetically carried through, but mule deer in particular, a lot of their behavior is learned behavior from mom. So you're right. So yeah, it may not be genetic, but it's behavior that's passed down from mom. And essentially what we're seeing is that on the Pinedale anticline in particular, mom is passing down that avoidance behavior. And so they're not getting used to it, essentially.
So it goes either way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah,
mom's
exactly.
good with it,
Yeah.
they're good with it.
So
too.
for example, like, yeah, towny deer, and Kevin and I were just talking about this on the way over. With towny deer, you know, by towny deer, I guess that's slang for, you know, the deer that you see in your neighbor's backyard eating
Right.
bird feed. In those circumstances, oftentimes those fawns are born in that environment. They're not necessarily migratory like these animals. So those fawns might be more used to that disturbance because mom doesn't seem too concerned with it, so the fawns don't. But with Wyoming range mule deer and the mule deer, the sublet herd that occurs on the Pinedale Anticline, those animals migrate to really like pristine summer ranges. And so for a good chunk of their life, they're exposed to minimal human activity and human disturbance. So when they come onto winter range, it's sort of potentially, you know, a surprise to them to all of a sudden have to deal with that other that disturbance that's there. Yeah. But yeah, those are really good questions because it is, I mean, yeah, our eyes don't lie. We see what our observations are on the ground. But it's usually when we're trying to make generalizations across the population, which is, you know, what we care about, then those trends, you see what the true trends kind of shine through.
Commissioner Anselmi.
President Little, I think
Thank
what
you,
she's trying to
Yeah.
say, or what I get out of this is that Calpet and this is right behind Charles's house at Mesa, that's been developed for, like you said, 15 years, and they've got, I know I saw the numbers a couple of years ago, how much the deer population has gone down up there, what it was before and what it has done, but, and I get your point is well taken, is it just starting up activity, but this has been there for, 15 years. That Mesa is pretty much developed. I mean, there's a little bit going on up there, but that's what that one map shows us. How they're going around to the left side, to the west side of it.
Yeah,
I guess,
Hall's stuff. Yeah.
going up to the left side there.
Yeah, and the maps. So Hall makes these maps every year, and the GPS trends pretty much are the same every year. I had a 2015 map that I should have kept in here just to show that habituation isn't really occurring. And yes, the population. I mean, we've been fortunate that Hall has been monitoring this population pretty closely, and it has declined. Been on a pretty steady decline ever since the beginning of development, and so. What our research is potentially showing is a mechanism behind that. So if these animals are losing out on forage, essentially if there's less food for these animals to eat, then the landscape can't hold that many animals. You know, it can only hold as many animals as it can feed, kind of thing.
President
Commissioner
Little,
Price?
the anticline is very familiar to me because I run cattle on it. But you, Samantha, and I understand what you're saying, and we see this, but as that development declines, do you think the deer will recolonize that and utilize that forage over time? It seems like, I've seen in my lifetime where I was actually raised up there in the range, right at the foot of the Wyoming range, and we didn't have antelope up there. When I was young, there was no antelope up there. None of them really, didn't see them on the west side of the river. But they've gradually moved up there and recolonized that whole area up in the ryegrass and the Wyoming range. And it didn't occur overnight, but they did, come up and do that. And I kind of think the deer will do the same. How long it takes is going to be the question.
That is the question, yeah, because, I mean, we have reason to believe that it's maybe not necessarily the infrastructure that they're avoiding, but it's traffic volumes and human activity that they're avoiding. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, especially on the Pinedale Anticline, if this research can continue when that energy development does hopefully eventually wean. It'll be interesting to see how those animals move back to those areas if they do.
there will be energy development there for quite a long time.
Yeah,
Because there's,
true.
so
Yeah.
it's not going to be an overnight thing, but
Yeah.
there's that. I guess the other thing that's kind of going to be this year, you may not have very many deer to recolonize it.
I know.
It's pretty tough over there
Yeah.
for the deer.
It is, yeah. We've already had some adult mortalities, which maybe I'll use this opportunity to segue into some of our summer stuff, because I'm talking about adult mortality right away, if that's okay. If
No,
we're
just
ready
go
to
ahead
do it.
and, I guess,
We missed our
Feel free to
opportunity
go-
to point out that Commissioner Price was in one of your slides.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can revisit that if we really want to.
yeah, get a hero picture up there.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
We can laugh about that. Okay, go ahead and just present
Okay.
make your presentation the way you planned.
Yeah, and I will. I'm glad you brought up adult survival, and it'll make sense in a moment here. But on our summer range stuff, as you guys know, is focused on effects of predation, nutrition, and summer habitat on survival of mule deer fawns. And so again, thank you guys for funding a third season for this. I think you'll see that it's invaluable for us to be able to have this third season of data collection. But getting to adult survival, adult survival of Wyoming range mule deer, what we've seen is around 92% annual adult survival. And so adult survival is pretty high for these animals, and that's pretty common of other mule deer populations. But one thing I would like to note, which Commissioner Price pointed out, is that we haven't, since the beginning of our study, we haven't had a harsh winter. So it'll be interesting to see how our annual adult survival may vary this winter, as well as our fawn survival over the winter. But anyways, so adult survival tends to be pretty high. And if we look at adult survival on summer ranges, what we see is that it's mostly driven by the amount of fat that animal has in March. So if an animal leaves winter range in really poor condition, the probability of survival is lower compared to one that left winter range in good condition. Now, if we look at fawn survival over the summer, the story is a little bit different. And what we see is, based on fetal rates that we measure in March, so that's the number of twins that a mom is pregnant with. Most of our deer are pregnant with twins. And so we have a potential of 1.7 fawns per adult doe at the very beginning of the summer. But what we see is that when we look at recruitment at the end of the summer, so the number of fawns that she brings to winter range with her, we see that almost half of those fawns are being lost over the course of the summer. And our recruitment averages are about 0.83 fawns per doe. So that's roughly 80 fawns to 100 does.
Commissioner Anselmi.
So Samantha, the North Winter Range is that stuff from Cokeville and Kemmer, right? And the south is the one by Big Piney, is it, or how's that?
Yeah, so the North Winter Range is the one by Big Piney, and the south is Cokeville Kemmer. Yep.
So it's less over at the Cokeville Kemmer one.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, so it
Last year, 15.
it fluctuates. Yeah, it fluctuates from year to year, depending on which winter range these animals use, and that makes sense because the habitat conditions between north and south winter ranges for these animals are quite different, and so we would expect that there's variation between those two. Yeah. But yeah, so overall recruitment, if you average all the recruitment just for Wyoming range animals, we see that about half of our fawns are lost over the course of the summer. And so this may suggest that the fawn survival could potentially be regulating population growth. And so it was important for us to understand, well, what's regulating fawn survival? And so in March of 2015, we put a vaginal implant transmitter into our collared does that were pregnant, And that VIT is the abbreviation for it, allows us to track the timing and location of when a birth occurs. When a birth occurred, we went out there, collared the fawn, and then monitored its daily survival. If a mortality occurred, we went out there as soon as possible to assess what specifically killed it, whether it appeared to be disease or a predator or died. We had a bunch of drownings this last year, which was quite interesting. So there's a whole suite of potential things that are killing these fawns. And so really the main direction that we want to take for this research, again, using the nutritional ecology framework, since we have these collared does and we have such good information on the habitats that they use, and we can characterize those habitats based on what forage is available or the vulnerability that they may have to predators, we can then link that to their nutritional condition and see how that then influences fawn survival. And so from here on out, I'm going to provide you with really our preliminary findings. And so I want to emphasize that they are preliminary, and there are some certain things that need to be finalized as we get certain lab reports back and various things like that. So in just a quick overview, in 2015, we were able to track 58 fawns. We had summer mortality of 45%, and a winter mortality of 10%. So overall mortality of our fawns last year was 55%, which is in line with what we see with recruitment. In 2016, we tracked 70 fawns. Summer mortality was higher at 56%, and so far our winter mortality is 3%. And as Commissioner Price had mentioned before, this is potentially going to be a pretty harsh winter for these deer, so I really wouldn't be surprised if we have a much higher winter mortality in our fawns this year compared to others, which also it emphasizes the importance of us having a third year, because it's now going to allow us to capture that variability in winter severity and how that affects fawn survival, where if we just had the 2 years prior, we wouldn't have been able to capture that variability. So in 2016, the cohort there, we've already seen 59% mortality. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the winter pans out. Now, if we look at cause-specific mortality, can see, I'm going to talk about certain, specific causes in more depth. But if you remember from last year, disease was the leading cause of death, and predation was tailing behind it. This year, we saw sort of a flip. Predation was the leading cause of death, and disease was the second leading cause of death. But I'll go into some more detail about some of those things. One thing I do want to point out is that this year in 2016, we saw more stillborns. So 15% of our fawns died as stillborns, where it was just 9% last year. And this is interesting because generally, mule deer don't generally have stillborns, and so there isn't a whole lot of information on what drives or what factors underline the probability of an animal having a stillborn or not. But what we did find with some of our data is that does that had a stillborn were in worse nutritional condition than does that didn't have a stillborn. And this aligns with our understanding of that relationship between nutritional condition of the doe and reproductive success. Next, I'll touch on some of our preliminary findings of disease. So as you remember, in 2015, adenovirus hemorrhagic disease was the dominant disease that was killing fawns among the different diseases. And so throughout the course of the year, it ended up accounting for 19% of all the mortalities. Where this year, in 2016, it seems to maybe not be quite as prevalent, but again, a lot of our lab results are still pending. And right now, all we can say is we have about 10% of our mortalities appear to very likely be from adenovirus. But again, results are still pending. And so a quick thing on this disease, as I have mentioned before, is that, this is a relatively new disease discovered in the early 90s, and it had been discovered in a few places, particularly in California, in somewhat rare situations, but had some pretty big outbreaks. And in Wyoming, prior to this study, there were a few rare cases of it being identified. And so it really wasn't until this study occurred, when we were actually handling fawns, where we were able to identify more of a prevalence of this disease throughout the state. And so this disease in particular, when a juvenile is infected by it, mortality rate is pretty high. And so, whereas if an adult is infected by it, the mortality rate isn't nearly as high. And so, really, the animals that are most heavily affected by it are juveniles and are fawns. So, we wouldn't necessarily be detecting it if we weren't looking at fawn survival. And so, a couple interesting things I just want to share with you guys that we found is, so these red dots represent known cases of adenovirus hemorrhagic disease and of fawns. So this is our data here. And you can see that there isn't really a particular habitat or a particular geographical location where this disease is occurring. It's sort of dispersed throughout the whole study area.
What's the red dot on the left? What town is that? I can't read it there.
Right here
Yeah,
it should be Afton.
that's Afton, okay.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, this is, I'll orient you guys. This is Salt Pass here. Wyoming Range, Salt Range. This blue line here is the Grays River. And this is Calpat country here. So the Winter Range out from Big Piney and Labarge. And so that was a mortality that actually occurred when that animal was on Winter Range. So another interesting thing that we found is that if one twin was infected and died of AHD, its other twin, early in the summer, so infected and died early in the summer, its other twin also died that summer as well. And so that makes sense, because what little we do know about this disease is that it is transmitted by direct contact. And so if one fawn dies from it, we would really expect that the other would die from it, and our data supports that idea. Yeah.
Commissioner Fry.
So the disease, it looks like it travels with the deer herd then, and possibly from what you've just said, the old doe may be the one transmitting that. Is that possible? Probable?
It is possible. Yeah, it definitely is possible. And really, those are things. So right now, we're working with the vet lab to develop a serology test so we can detect adenovirus in live adults. And it still hasn't been developed yet, but we're working on it, and hopefully we'll have one. So we, with all of our does, we have blood samples from them. So once that test is developed, we'll be able to see which does potentially are carrying it, which does aren't, and how that then relates to whether their fawns die from it, or how the disease is moving throughout the herd. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So now moving on to predation. In 2015, just some simple breakdowns. We had 6% of our fawns were eaten by bears and 9% by coyotes. And in 2016, the number of predations increased. Coyotes accounting for 22% and bears still around 5%. And one thing, there's a couple things I'd like to actually point out about this. First, so upon initial look, it looks like, well, we had a lot more predation this year. But one thing I would like to point out is our number of unknowns. So in 2015, we had more unknowns, and a lot of those probably were either cases of predation or disease. And so this difference between these 2 years here may not actually be quite as dramatic as we see, but since we had that many unknowns, we can't really say anything more beyond that. Another thing I would like to point out is that a lot of times with these studies, and we just look at sheer numbers of proportion of animals that die from various things, especially with predators. There's a lot of these factors, such as disease and the nutritional condition of the fawn itself. A lot of those factors can work in collaboration with their vulnerability to dying from a predator. So, for example, a fawn that's in poorer condition may be more vulnerable to dying to a predator, and if a predator didn't get at it, it may very likely have just died on its own because it was already dying of malnutrition. And so one interesting thing that we did find is, so when we look at the risk of predation within the first 2 weeks of these fawns, what we found was that the risk of predation decreased 83% for each increase of 1 kilogram in the weight of the fawn. So essentially, fawns that were bigger had greater chances of not dying from predation, and smaller fawns were at greater risk of dying of predation. And so another way to say this,
Could you clarify? Are you talking strictly birth weight, or are you talking as the fawn
birth
grows?
weight. Yep, talking strictly birth weight. Yeah. So another way to think of this is compared to a 3 kilogram fawn, a 4 kilogram fawn has a 17% chance of being eaten. And so this 17% chance of that bigger fawn being eaten is the exact same probability of the Broncos making it to playoffs this year. And as we all know, that didn't work out too well for the Broncos. So essentially, the probability of these bigger fawns, the risk of their predation is so much lower than when compared with the smaller fawns. And it just gets stronger and stronger. So a 4 kilogram fawn versus a 1 kilogram fawn has even less of a probability compared to that 1 kilogram.
So basically, what this does is link back to nutrition.
Exactly. Yep.
The condition of the doe, having a good fawn,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe getting up, he doesn't get diseasy. He's faster on his feet when the coyote comes by.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, I'm glad you bring that up, because all of those, I mean, there's so many there's a lot of possibilities of what might be dictating this risk of predation. But yeah, if it's weight of the fawn, and we know that from previous research that better conditioned does tend to have better conditioned fawns, then that link seems to be emerging right now. So we're pretty excited about these findings, and really right now we're still somewhat data limited on running these like really big complicated models that incorporates all of those different things, so we can disentangle the relative role of each one of those factors. But this is encouraging that we're finding evidence that suggests that mom's condition may be linked to something as simple as risk of predation. So, yeah, and with that, I just showed you some of our highlights of some of our research, and we're still really just chipping away at this big iceberg that we have, and trying to really disentangle all of these relative roles of this whole suite of factors that can affect population growth. And I think we're making good progress, and I'm excited for the additional progress that we make, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to share it with you guys again. So,
Commissioner Anselmi?
Samantha and Dr. Monteith, and I guess we'll have a report on the deer project sometime too, with these same kind of numbers about the fawn survival and stuff. And I guess you guys probably take both of these studies and you compare them and you find similar things in both populations, or those fawns at the deer project were real light.
Yes, sir. Yeah. The fawns associated with the deer project to South Rock Springs, very similar study design. focused on survival, cross-Pacific mortality, contributions of habitat, fawn, predation, those sorts of things. Fawn survival was lower this summer in that country compared with the Wyoming range. Interestingly, some similar signature coyote predation was the leading cause of mortality for those fawns down in that country. And we have a number of lab results still pending as well, but we do know that at least in some of them, we detected adenovirus, fawn loss associated with adenovirus
Down there too.
Yep, but coyote predation, most definitely the leading cause of mortality for fawns down there. And I think at this point, we're nearing at least like 65% or so of the fawns that we followed this summer down in that country block, maybe pushing 70%. But yeah, it'll be a nice comparison between the two studies, because they are one lives in a fairly high desert system, so the seasonal nutritional ecology of those animals, we already know from the work that we've done to date, is quite a bit different than the skeleton and the Wyoming range, many of which migrate to some of that nice, robust summer habitat. The females that live down in that South Rock Springs country are it's almost like they're living on a winter range all year round. So their nutritional dynamics are definitely different, which may result in some different factors that are contributing to sustainability or growth within those periods. And those deer are much smaller also, which maybe what you were referencing before, body mass wise, they're markedly smaller than the deer that reside in the Wyoming.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Very interesting.
That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it, and,
Thank you.
and good work, you guys. Thanks.
Thanks. And actually, I'd be remiss to say that this is a huge collaborative project, and so it's not just us. We're working very closely with Game and Fish and a lot of other agencies and organizations throughout the state to make this stuff happen. So, yeah, collaboration is the only way to make it work. So, yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Madam President, if I could,
Yes, Deputy
we
Director
had
Smith.
one more request from Commissioner Price along these lines. If I could, I know we're pushing up against break, but real quick. So the Mule Deer Initiative that was completed in Western Wyoming, Sam's research is one product of that. That's the public really wanted to see more Game and Fish involved in more research. And so every year now we go back to the public through our MDI process to update them. And that's, we have Sam come to some of those meetings and help relay this information. So I just wanted to give you the update that as the field managers in Western Wyoming, Jackson-Pinedale region, last week on January 11th and 12th, held public meetings to give these updates in both Jackson and Star Valley. And so as part of the Mule Deer Initiative process, we have committed that every year we'll go back to the public, whether it's research projects like Kevin and Samantha are conducting, or habitat projects, to let them know, our commitment is still there. Your $2.5 million is being put on the ground for habitat work and supporting research. And so it just kind of all ties together. And just wanted to be sure the commission understood that we're living up to those commitments. We have MDI projects throughout the whole state. Just happens Wyoming Range was the very first one, in addition to Platte Valley, that we kicked off. And we're really seeing the fruits of that labor now, not only with great research and more information we can use in our management, but the public support of all that. And then, of course, your dollars that you committed has really made this a win-win for the department.
Thank you. Are there, Commissioner Price?
I think one of the things, when they did this public presentation on the results, and Samantha and Kevin, I believe, were invited to those, the weather is so bad that they couldn't come. And so as a result, Kemmer was canceled. Pinedale, I went to that. It was lightly attended. Jackson was lightly attended. And I don't know how Star Valley went.
We had 14, I believe, attend at Star Valley. No, 16 attend at Star Valley, 14 in Jackson.
So the department did try to do that, but it was just weather-wise impossible. And to keep the public appraised of the situation. So I wanted to make clear that they did work hard to do that, but it was just weather-related problems that prevented that.
And we
Yeah.
will,
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Madam President and Commissioners, we will have another opportunity then during the formal season setting to answer some of those types of questions. We won't be given the formal presentation, but there's still a lot of question and answer that takes place in addition to just the seasons that are proposed. The public is really interested in these types of projects as well.
Any
Thank
other,
you, Scott.
any other questions? Thank you, Deputy Director Smith, and thanks for the update. Really appreciate it. Mr. Coffrin. Chief Coffrin. I should be more formal.
Madam President, Commissioner, Deputy Director Kennedy. I'm going to put up some drawings here. As John mentioned, these will be up in the Bighorn room over lunch. But I'll specifically use the floor plan photos to explain where we're at with construction on the new Laramie Regional Office Wildlife Forensic Fish Health Lab. So, kind of give you an update since the November Commission meeting. Construction started right around when we had that meeting. Basically, as any other project, they started with site preparation, removing the topsoil, putting up fences, safety and silt, etc. Things really got rolling in December. Many of you have probably looked at the photos we have on the Google Drive. We set up for you to keep you informed. It showed a large machine. You can see those pictures at lunch, but basically that was used to set some aggregate piers for the building. I informed you before there's a large amount of groundwater in our building location. And when they did their test hole, they reached groundwater at about 9 feet. So these piers were to help stabilize the building. About 250 of them spaced about every 6 feet. And they're 15 feet deep. So your building won't go anywhere now that those are in the ground. And basically they lay the foundation on top of those piers for support. That took quite a while in December, and towards the end of the month they poured the concrete footer for building A, and Richardson Construction split the building into 3 parts. This part here is the regional office component. They call that building A. Shop here, building B. The lab, building C. And what that will allow for as they move, they didn't want to dig and have the total foundation area exposed to freezing weather. So they started on building A, the regional office component, put the heaters on the ground, got the footer poured, and they're scheduled Friday to pour the foundation wall on building A. With the warming trend we have this week also, they're digging the foundation out on building B, which is the shop. So they haven't had a whole lot of weather delays. A few days there at the beginning of the month when it was 60 below. Of course, the roads were closed, and for human safety, they shut down. But basically, that's been about it, other than taking a day or two off for the holiday. So construction's still proceeding as planned. Lauren will be available at lunch, as will I. We can talk about any of the photos, go over any of the pictures, but that's kind of where we're at right now with the Laramie project.
Commissioner Anselmi.
It just dovetails real well with the presentation we just had and how important this lab is with our research and the things that are coming up. I mean, they're waiting for lab results, and we have a great lab crew and people, but I guess with more room and better facilities, these tests will be a little more timely and for our research and things like that.
Thank you. Any other Commissioner Culver?
Scott, could you please clarify for us, so are we on time, are we on budget, and what's our expected completion date?
Madam President, Commissioner Culver, from the date of the signed contract, which I don't have the exact date, but they have 16 months from that date to finish the building. So they are on schedule, no change orders of any magnitude to date. So there may be a few weather days, like those 4 days they were shut down, which is up for negotiation, but I've been very pleased with the minimal amount and the work that I've been able to get done through winter. So
Good,
everything's on schedule, on budget.
great.
Good question, good question.
Is this,
Commissioner
how are we
Anselm.
doing this in like, at risk, or what are the two different options you do these things at? Construction manager at risk, and what's the other? Or what-
Madam President, Commissioner Anselmi, that's for the camp, conservation
Yeah,
camp.
well, how's this, and how do we got this one signed up?
This was a hard bid, put out on public purchase, and how many bids did we receive, Warren? 9?
Nine?
9 general contractors, and the price for the general contractor was 14.7 million. I think the next lowest bid was 14.9. It was done
So
through
this
the
is
hard bid
design
process.
build, is that what you call this then?
Correct. Very competitive bid. Only $200,000 difference between the low bid and the next lowest.
Madam President, Mayor,
Commissioner Rael.
wasn't the engineer's estimate 16 million miles, something like that?
Madam President, Commissioner Rail, yes, that's the total price. The 14.7 just for the general contractor.
Commissioners, anything else? Chief Coffin, thank you for the update. We really appreciate it and all your hard work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cole.
President Little, members of the commission, Deputy Director Kennedy. Jean Cole, Chief of the Fiscal Division for agenda topic number 6, which is the appointment of licensed selling agents. The department has received 2 applications for the commission to consider this morning for appointing of agents. The first one is in Commissioner Culver's district, which is Paradise Foods in Pine Haven, Wyoming. This application is for a transfer of ownership, so I have a new business owner, and the local game warden and regional supervisor would like to extend this agent the opportunity to continue licensed selling at this location. They have been a selling agent since 2007, and they have annual sales of over $26,000, and it definitely serves a need in a local community for the needs of the public. The second application is in Commissioner Price's district, and this one is not a new application, but this is a situation where by statute, all of the license agents are required to submit to the department by December 1 an annual bond fee of $50 and an application to continue selling licenses to the next calendar year. And Grand Teton Association, which is a very important spot in Jackson for license sales, they failed to meet the deadline of December 1st. And they're asking for consideration for the commission to accept their renewal to continue selling licenses. And we do have every year vendors that don't meet the December 1 deadline, and I do come to the commission each year at the first meeting in January and ask that the applications be accepted past the deadline by statute. And so I would like to ask the commission to consider renewing this location to sell licenses for the department. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Culver, do you have anything you want to say about the Pine Haven?
No, I guess I'm surprised at the amount of sales up there, but I guess their proximity to Keyhole Reservoir, it makes sense.
That's correct.
But
We're just going to wait till we have a quorum here
Sounds
without
good.
me, without me having to add to it. Let's put it that way.
Excuse me, and
They told Charles he could still help.
yeah, he can still go out and help.
Oh, you mean you took time out so you could finagle that real quick?
Yes.
Well, we all know where your loyalty lies.
Enjoy that.
All righty. Commissioner Anselmi and Commissioner Price, so the presentation by the department has been to, by Chief Cole, has been to, I gotta find out where I'm at here. Okay, to approve the transfer of ownership, and this is for licensed selling agents, for the Paradise Foods at Pine Haven, Wyoming, and the renewal, just because they missed the renewal date, she's still recommending the renewal of Grand Teton Association in Jackson, Wyoming. And other than a comment by Commissioner Culver that he was surprised by the amount of sales at Pine Haven, we've had no other discussion, and I wondered if you guys had any questions.
I do.
Okay,
President Little,
Commissioner Price.
Jean, normally they would, if they missed like this, they would go off and then have to reapply. So we're kind of extending them out just a little bit and saving that part of the cycle.
President Little, Commissioner Price said is absolutely correct. By statute, they cancel if they don't submit the bond by December 1. And the statutes require them to reapply to the commission, and we're extending a courtesy to them with eliminating the time frame of not having sales, and that was issued by that vendor for the time they would have to take to reapply to the commission, wait for the next commission meeting in March, have that 3 months of no sales.
Do you think that's justified?
I do.
Okay, thank you. That's the question.
Further questions or discussion?
Yeah.
If, yes,
I
Commissioner
should
Anselmo.
have called you up. I'm sorry. What is the Grand Teton Association? I couldn't figure out by this application.
President Little, Commissioner Anselmi, this is the building which I'm sure you did, Commissioner Anselmi, that's right next to the Jacksonville office, and it's a building that houses the Forest Service and other agencies within the department, and it's the visitor center. So it is a very important place where customers and visitors do stop and get information about hunting, fishing, and recreation opportunities in the area.
Thank you.
So, Madam President, I would move that the commission approve the temporary license sale application for Paradise Foods and the continuation of the license selling application for Grand Teton Association, whatever it was.
And if I might, Commissioner Cole, you mean the transfer of rather than the temporary?
No, I mean the temporary. It's they're applying for a temporary permit at Pine Haven.
Commissioner, President Little and Commissioner Holder, President Little is correct. They are asking for a permanent appointment. They've been granted a temporary 120-day transfer. They're asking for this
Oh, okay.
permanent appointment.
My mistake.
So are you comfortable with that rephrasing?
I am.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so Sherry, we have a motion made by Commissioner Culver to accept the transfer for Pine Haven and a renewal of the Grand Teton Association, and a second by Commissioner Price. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Please say nay, sorry. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, well, we are, I am rocking today. But we, while it would be nice to be able to move up to the next thing on the agenda, I mean, this agenda is posted, and, you know, there might be people that are waiting to come until after the lunch hour to, on the topics which follow, so we will just take a break early.
Cool.
And we will return as scheduled at 1:15, and we hope to see you all back then. Enjoy your lunch. And there's a lunch being served for the department, and
That's one of the.
we're good? Thank you all very much.